An apology might be the starting point in the conversation, but with an attitude and a spirit of, okay, so let's work this out. What needs to happen?
Yeah.
What do we both need to do here in order to bring about change? So it's a willingness to acknowledge there's a problem and a willingness to change and work together on it, rather than sticking yourself in this very withdrawn, isolated sort of place of stubborn defense.
Welcome to Midlife Answers, the podcast where we take one real question from people in midlife and unpack it with an expert, clearly, compassionately, and in under 15 minutes. Today's question is one that so many of us think, but very few say out loud. Why do I feel resentful towards my partner, and how on earth do I bring it up? If you're noticing irritability, emotional distance, or that low hum of frustration you can't quite name, you're not alone. Midlife piles on work, hormones, caregiving, responsibility, and often unspoken expectations. So I brought in Suzette, a specialist in couples dynamics and communication, to help us understand what resentment really is, where it comes from, and how to start a conversation that doesn't lead to defensiveness or conflict. Suzette, a very warm welcome again to Midlife Answers. This is a very popular topic that we're going on to discuss. Let's jump straight in. I imagine as a couples therapist, you come across resentment on a regular basis. So how do you start to work through that in your own practice?
Yes, how indeed do we do that? The defensiveness is a big part of where couples really struggle, and usually, headbutt up until the point where they're at breaking point and then seek out couples therapy. So really trying to work on responses that aren't defensive is part of the skills development that I like to really get into with couples. How do you listen without interrupting or without getting really fired up by what your partner's saying and then interrupting their flow? That's the first issue. So the learning how to actively listen and to hold your peace and to listen in a way that's not going to rile the partner whilst they're trying to get something off their chest. I think all of that is quite difficult to achieve. No, it's nuance. So, practicing that in the room and having me observing when it's happening in real time in the session, being a sort of an impartial observer and being curious about the dynamics that sort of playing out, but like watching tennis, the passing the ball over. So slowing that down is key. Slowing it right down. That's the first step.
Right. So before we get into how those conversations can start, because I think it's the hardest thing sometimes. How do you start a conversation without causing shutdown or defensiveness? Can we just maybe go back and say, is resentment a common experience that people in long-term relationships go through, particularly when, from a woman's perspective, there are hormones, there potentially could be work overload, there could be exhaustion, all that thrown into the mix?
Yes, it happens a lot. I mean, we can't speak for everyone, can we? But it's very common, I would say. And it might be helpful to some of the listeners to consider alternating the word resentment with frustration, because they're similar. They mean same sort of thing. If I'm feeling frustrated with my partner. Yes, in perimenopause, menopause periods of our lives, mood swings and irritability are, par for the course because our hormones are fluctuating and depleting. So unless we've got something in place that's supporting us during that, relationships really can be nosediving. And this is, something that plays out. But sort of perimenopause and menopause aside, it might be something to do with the relationship. Often I find is, what is it you're resenting? Are you not feeling appreciated anymore? Has your partner become complacent? Are they not, saying thank you? Are they not noticing? Are they not, really giving you the kind of attention that you might like? So trying to work out what's happening is complicated, but that's the starting point. What are the feelings? What are they about?
And so once you've found out what those feelings are, whether it is feeling unsupported or there is a lack of interest, or you're just physically exhausted and you just need more support. How do you bring up those conversations then, Suzette? Because it's very easy as soon as you go to someone saying, you're doing this or you're not doing that, the easiest thing is them to walk away or to come back and say, well, you're not doing it either. And it actually becomes a tit for tat and nothing gets resolved.
Yeah, good point. Well, I think not bringing it up is the worst thing you can do. But I think a lot of people are conflict avoidant, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
The problem is, the belief is, oh, don't bring it up, it'll just cause more problems kind of attitude is a bit naive, really, because if we're squashing something squashing it down, it's going to bubble up and come out at some point. And then usually it comes out in a more uncontrollable manner. So you're better off pausing, working out what you want to say, maybe writing it down even, and having time to sit on it for a little while. Don't do it straight away. And then pick your time. Pick a time where you're both, as best as you can be, decompressed, rather than finding a time when it's at a high pressure point.
Then do you say to your partner then, I would like to talk to you about something, and maybe book in a time to do that?
Time, rather than doing it right there, right then, and so that the partner knows something's coming and that it's important to you, and that you want to really give them time to think about it from their perspective, so they don't feel like they're on the back foot and that they're being attacked, that they're being given the opportunity to say how they feel about it.
When that moment comes up, then how do you start that conversation? Is there a particular language that we should be using?
Well, everyone's different, aren't they? But really, it's really good in these scenarios to try to use sentences that begin with I, rather than starting with you, because it can make the start of a conversation feel like a pointed finger. You do this and you frustrate me and blah blah blah, but as opposed to saying, okay, I'm owning how I feel, and then bringing them in. So it might be, I I sometimes feel um a bit let down when you come in through the door and you're on your phone and you don't acknowledge that I'm here. I just would feel so much better if you could just, come and say hello, and just even a peck on the cheek.
Yeah.
I feel more special because it's making me feel down. So you own how you're feeling first.
Mhm.
It might still be hard to hear. So, you're still saying how you feel, but you're not starting it with, you make me feel.
And do you think that is one of the most common mistakes, that when we do feel we need to talk about something, we jump in and say, you're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Rather than
switch it back.
switch it back and say, I am feeling this, and I'm noticing when you do this, it can kind of trigger that. And I would feel like this if you did that instead. So that they're getting some real detail about what they can do about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's giving them as much information as possible about how you are feeling. And so they will then know how to respond. I think so many of us can leave it to when we're at boiling point, and it can all come out in a muddle, and they're just like, I don't understand what's going on. So it's about owning how you feel and making it about you and not them.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely hold my hands up, and been there, got the t-shirt, done that, done all all that, blow my top, etc. What I would say, and I hear this a lot from friends, myself, I've believed it, and from clients, is often women want men to know how they feel and act accordingly, and feel that they don't want to have to tell their partners. They somehow want them to work it out, and that would be so much better than having to spell it out. But having done years on this, it's like you're going to have to come round to the idea that spelling it out is going to lead to a more successful outcome and shorten the pain time.
Just a quick one. If you love Midlife Answers and want to support what I'm building here, you can buy me a coffee or a green tea for people that know me. It helps with the behind the scene costs and means I can keep bringing you these honest midlife conversations. The link's in the show notes. Thank you. That is such a good takeaway because I'm guilty of just assuming my husband knows how I feel. And it frustrates me that he doesn't, and I have to spell it out. And I think, well, you're a human being. Can you not see how I'm feeling? But they're not living my life and I'm not living their life. And so there does need to be that communication. I think that is so powerful. And I think it's also really important to say, Suzette, this is a natural cause of relationships, isn't it? To have these moments where you are frustrated, you are resentful, you are angry, but it's how you communicate that. So moving forward then, to end with something positive with our midlife answers. If a couple is struggling at the minute, they feel like they're a bit at loggerheads, what would you suggest that they should do sooner rather than later to help them work through this difficult situation?
Set the scene for conversation. Either take it outside. So it might be going on a long walk. Sometimes walking side by side is less confrontational. I've heard a lot of couples say we have our best, challenging conversations if we're walking side by side. So that's a good one for some couples. Some people are frightened of conflict or getting into a row and find that they do that at home more often because they're safe in their own home to just let rip. So maybe going to a cafe or something like that so that there's a containment. If it's got that bad, that can be useful because there are other people, present. It might be running a bath, lighting some candles, just sort of dialing things down, very soothing, calming environment. And to come back to my earlier point, saying, let's take it in turns to talk and let's agree not to interrupt each other. Look, have a timer or an egg timer or whatever, or, just be mindful that you're going to let each other speak until you finish saying what you want to say and then take it in turns. I do that in my room. I do it more like structured exercises like that to really help teach people the power of not interrupting. That's just the first point, but there's a lot that can be done there.
No, absolutely. And your work as a couples therapist, like you said, it takes time and it takes commitment. But to know that these first steps can be implemented sooner rather than later. And it is about being heard, but also about listening at the same time.
About listening and then what you do with what you've listened to.
Yeah. And how you act on that.
And how you act and how you respond. So if you say something that's quite challenging and difficult about your relationship and your partner is able to listen and respond calmly and with empathy, even better if there's a sort of a form of taking some responsibility, that might be in the form of an apology, then it's really going to go in a different direction.
Can we bring in apologizing? Because there's obviously a place for it. But I think sometimes people can be quick to apologize, to think, oh, I apologize, let's move on. So what's your take on apologizing?
Yeah, it's very nuanced, isn't it? Just apologizing and thinking there's no more work to be done. It's common, but it's naive, and it's rarely enough if a couple have really reached this high levels of resentment or resentment that's been going on for a long time. It might be absolutely fine for some ad hoc stuff. But if this is real relationship difficulties, then an apology might be the starting point in the conversation, but with an attitude and a spirit of, okay, so let's work this out. What needs to happen?
Yeah.
What do we both need to do here in order to bring about change? So it's a willingness to acknowledge there's a problem and a willingness to change and work together on it rather than sticking yourself in this very withdrawn, isolated sort of place of stubborn defense. I'm right, you're wrong. So the apology can be the first bit, but it's those other bits that are key. And without them, I can't do it. I can't help couples. If one person's been dragged into therapy, but they don't see their part in it.
It's about meeting in the middle. And I love how you put that. The apology is the first thing to do. And then after that, that is where the work and the communication needs to carry on.
I think we really need to excavate deep down below to see what's underneath the, what's bubbling up. So we can get to the root cause of the problems. They might be saying it's one thing or the other, but it could actually be a lot more than that. So, that's work. That's lots of listening, lots of asking questions to understand is important. Because otherwise partners can be sometimes accused of blowing things out of proportion because they might be looking at one thing that's caused them to blow their top. But it's what's underneath really that's more of value and interesting.
And it's very often, isn't it, Suzette, something quite minor can flip the switch, but actually it's something that's been brewing under the surface that is the root cause of it, and it's getting to that root cause opposed to maybe what's simmering on top.
Yeah.
As always, Suzette, thank you so much. And I will be putting your link to your own work as a couples therapist in the show notes. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Rachel. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to today. Feeling resentment isn't uncommon in relationships. It happens to so many of us, but it's how we handle that feeling that determines whether we're adding fuel to the fire or gently calming things down. There was so much to take away from Suzette's advice today, using I instead of you, actually listening without interrupting, which, to be honest, that will take some practice for me, and setting the scene so the conversation has a chance to be productive instead of explosive. And who knew that apologising is really just the starting point for continuing the conversation, not a cue to end it. For me personally, a big reminder is I can't expect my husband to understand how I'm feeling if I haven't actually told him. I imagine a few of you might relate to this too. As always, if anything you've heard today brings up bigger feelings, or you feel like you'll need more support, please reach out to your GP or a healthcare professional. You don't have to navigate this alone. If you've got a question you'd love me to cover in a future Bite-Sized episode, send it over on Instagram at Midlife Answers or through the link in the show notes. Remember, no topic is off limits. And if this episode helped, the best way to support the show is to follow, rate and share it with someone who you think might need to listen to this. I'll see you next time with another midlife question finally answered.